Good morning to all. I'll be talking a brief about basics and mainly about how to read both normal and abnormal OCT. OCT, as you know, is a very quick, non-invasive and reproducible imaging tool. It works on the principle of low coherence interferometry to produce cross-sectional images of the retina. It uses infrared light from a superluminescent diode, which is divided into two parts, one of which is reflected from a reference mirror and the other is scattered from the biological tissue which is under study. If you look at the history and evolution of OCT, it took almost 3 decades from the first concept of seeing inside the tissue to the generation of Stratus OCT in 2002. But after that, it's been a faster modification in technology with SD OCT coming into picture in 2006 and swept source OCT in 2012. As I've told you already, this works on the principle of low coherence interferometry. Here you have to understand two concepts. One is interference, another one is coherence. Interference is the phenomenon that occurs when two light waves meet each other and are superimposed. And coherence is the ability of the two light beams to produce interference. And the light source is either a superluminescent diode or a femtosecond laser. And interference is produced between the light reflected from the tissue of interest and the light reflected from the reference path, as I have shown in the picture. This is the working principle of time domain OCT, where the light source is split into one into reference beam and the other into the central beam. And the back reflected light from both the arms is combined together and recorded by the detector. The only drawback here is the mirror, the reference mirror is not fixed. It has to be moved for each scan. Hence, it takes time. Time domain OCT, hence time consuming and gives less scans per second. This shows the principle of both spectral domain and source OCT. While spectral domain uses spectrometer as the light source, here in the swept source, a sweeping light source is used for the light. And both of the parameters, implementations record an interference spectrum which carries the depth information of the sample. This signal is then converted into A scan by FFT, Fourier transformation. So when we compare time domain, spectral domain, and swept source OCT, time domain uses superluminescent diode of 810 nanometers. Here the detector is a single photon detector. Unfortunately, the mirror is moving. So hence the scans per second are less with 400 A scans per second, and the range of imaging is from the vitreoretinal interface to the RPE. Spectral domain uses broadband superluminescent diode of 840 nanometers. It has an array of detectors and the mirror is fixed. Hence, it gives more scanning, higher scanning rate of 27,000 to 70,000 scans per second with an axial resolution of 5 to 7 microns and a transverse resolution of 14 to 20 microns. And with EDI incorporated in it, it can image from the posterior cortical vitreous to the sclera. Swept source so OCT uses tunable laser of 1050 nanometers, much longer wavelength with a single detector. Hence, this gives an advantage of it over spectral domain in the scans per second, which is very high, 1 lakh to 4 lakhs per scans per second, resolution being the same. And the imaging, you can image from the posterior cortical vitreous to the sclera. And when you compare, they say it is superior to spectral domain. These are the three different pictures showing the different OCTs from different machines. As you see, the only drawback in time domain is the differentiation between the ISOS and the RP, which is very difficult, whereas in spectral domain and swept source, it is easily identified. Since SD OCT is most commonly used everywhere and swept source is available in a limited institutions, the most commonly used OCT scan protocols in SD OCT are a macular cube, which is a 3D scan which consists of number of horizontal line scans composing either a 6x6, 7x7 or 12x9 rectangular box. The radial scan consists of 6 to 12 line scans arranged in equal angles with common axis, and raster is a series of parallel line scans that can be oriented in any angle and is of higher resolution. Before going into reading an abnormal OCT, let us learn something about the normal OCT and how anatomical layers seen on an OCT. Either it can be hyporeflective or hyperreflective. In general, you remember all the nerves appear hyperreflective and cells appear hypo. The RPE Brooks complex, the ISOS junction, and the ellipsoid zone, which falls between the ISOS and the RPE Brooks, are hyperreflective. ELM is hyperreflective. Outer plexiform layer, inner plexiform layer, and the NFL are hyperreflective. And when you see the posterior cortical vitreous, that also appears hyperreflective. As I said, the cellular layers like the outer nuclear layer, inner nuclear layer, the ganglion cell layer, and the myoid zone. Myoid zone falls between the ELM and the ISOS. They're all hyperreflective. Coming to choroid, choroid is a mixture of both, as it contains the vessels as well as the stroma. It's a mixture of hypo with hyperreflectivity. What can cause abnormal reflectivity on OCT? Either it has to be reduced when there is accumulation of fluid in any level, or it has to be increased reflectivity, which is termed as hyperreflectivity. It can happen with the accumulation of hard exudates, calcification, hemorrhage, epiretinal or vitreous membranes, choroidal neovascularization, and RPE hyperplasia. It can also cause a choroidal hyperreflectivity when RPE atrophy happens. Now let us concentrate more on how to read OCT. For the ease of reading, you divide it into posterior cortical vitreous, vitreoretinal interface, retinal layers, and the choroid. If you look at this OCT, the cortical vitreous is normal, the foveal contour is normal, all the retinal layers, choroid, everything appears normal. The next concept is assessing the central macular thickness, because this is very important when you go further in the talks. This is calculated between 2 points. The anterior boundary is formed by the tip where the foveal depression, and the posterior boundary, remember, it depends on what kind of OCT machine you're using. If you're using a time domain, as it is very difficult to differentiate between ISOS and RPE, ISOS marks the posterior boundary, whereas in spectral domain and swept source, since you can make out the demarcation very clearly, RPE acts as the posterior boundary. I have put two pictures here. In both, you can see the posterior cortical vitreous contains tiny hyperreflective dots. Are they same or are they different? For this, very important that you have the clinical picture with you. For example, in the first clinical picture corresponding to the OCT, this gentleman had floaters of recent onset, and when you see clinically, there is vitreous hemorrhage. So here in the first picture, these hyperreflective dots represent blood. Whereas in the second one, the gentleman came with floaters and he had vitreous haze of 3+. And in the second OCT, hence these hyperreflective dots, they represent inflammatory debris rather than blood. So whenever you read an OCT, you should be thorough with your clinical picture, either mentally or next to you. Now let us read this here. If you see the posterior cortical vitreous, you see it as a thin hyperreflective membrane separated from the retinal surface. However, the contour is normal and the central macular thickness is preserved. But here, if you see, even it has separated, it is still attached at the fovea, thus abutting the foveal contour. This is called vitreomacular adhesion. Here, it has not only attached to the fovea, but it is also causing a pull, hence increasing the central macular thickness. Hence, it is called a vitreomacular traction. In the first OCT, as the arrow mark shows you, there is a hyperreflective membrane on the surface of the retina. Since it is on the surface, it is called epiretinal membrane. And the lower picture, if you see the arrow mark, there is a discontinuity in the retinal surface contour, and this defect extends throughout the entire thickness. Hence, it is called full thickness macular hole. And also the edges are edemata showing abnormal hyperreflectivity suggestive of fluid accumulation. Now, if you see this OCT, the contour is okay. The central macular thickness is preserved. If you see the pointer pointing towards the area, that area, the inner and the middle layers are hyperreflective when compared to other side. If you see clinically, this shows an infarct. So any infarct on an OCT appears abnormally hyperreflective. It can involve the inner retinal layers, or it can involve the inner and the middle retinal layers also. Here, if you see, the central macular thickness is increased. This is because of the fluid collection, which appears as abnormal hyperreflective cystoid spaces. And if you concentrate on the subretinal space, that is also hyperreflective. So this is called subfoveal serous retinal detachment. And if you want to read this OCT, you have to read it as cystoid macular edema with subfoveal serous retinal detachment. And if you see clinically, the patient shows changes of non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy, and this OCT hence gives you a result of diabetic macular edema. This is a bit different. Here also you can see subfoveal serous retinal detachment. However, the parafoveal area looks edematous, but here you don't see cystoid spaces, you see some sponge-like edema. This is called spongy edema with subfoveal serous retinal detachment. And you can also see accumulation of abnormal hyperreflectivity which corresponds to hard exudates on the clinical picture. Hence, this is called SSRD with parafoveal spongiedema and hard exudates. One more thing you have to notice is that these tiny hyperreflective dots, they are not limited only to the outer layers. They are seen throughout the retinal layers. Even you can see them in the choroid also in some cases. These are called hyperreflective dots or HRDs, and they are only OCT findings. They are not seen clinically. In this picture, the contour is normal. However, the central macular thickness is increased. And you can see that the subretinal space is occupied by hyperreflective cavity. If you see clinically, this gentleman is a young man with a recent onset of positive glaucoma. So I'll take just 2 minutes. So this corresponds to neurosensory detachment suggestive of CSCR. In this picture, the normal foveal contour is there, the retinal layers are normal. However, you see some hyperreflectivity in the RP. These deposits, if you see clinically, they represent drusen. The placing of drusen, either they can be subretinal or sub-RP, depending on the location above or below the basement membrane. Here in this OCT, the cystoid spaces, what you see, along with that, you concentrate on the subretinal space. Here it is occupied by hyperreflective material. This is called subretinal hyperreflective material. And if you go through the other scan, you can also see subretinal fluid. So remember, go through all the scans, correlate clinically before jumping into diagnosis, as this points towards a CNVM related to wet AMD. Here I have put two pictures of pigment epithelial detachments. The above is a normal, see, it looks like a serous PED with no retinal changes, no subretinal fluid. You correlate it clinically, this gentleman has only a serous PED, no evidence of hemorrhage, no evidence of drusen. However, if you want to confirm, do an ICGA, rule out any abnormal causes of serous PED and monitor up frequently. Whereas the lower one, the lower pigment epithelial detachment, has some contents. It is a mixture of both hypo and hyperreflective material, as well as this patient has subretinal fluid and drusen. When you see clinically, it shows a hemorrhagic PED with drusen. So this points more towards type 1 CNV related to wet AMD. With the introduction of sweat stores and EDI, your picture is more towards choroid now. Choroid has three layers: inner choriocapillaris, middle satellus, and outer hallux. And if you want to measure the subfoveal choroidal thickness, it ranges from the RPE Brooks to the choroidoscleral junction. There are two conditions in which you can have an increased choroidal thickness. You have to differentiate between pachychoroid, which is like seen here, for example, the choroidal thickness is increased. And if you see clearly, the hallux are enlarged, compressing the two layers. These are called pachyvessels. So increased choroidal thickness with the presence of pachyvessels points towards pachychoroid. There is another condition in which the choroidal thickness is increased. It is due to inflammation due to VKH, where you see in general, the choroid is increased, the thickness is increased. And with treatment, the choroidal thickness comes down. So it's very important for you to see why and how the choroid is increased, the thickness is increased, and then diagnose properly. So to summarize, it's a non-invasive and easily reproducible test. It's become an essential part of our practice. Hence, judicious use helps in both better diagnosis and management. Go through all the scans, correlate clinically before taking any decision regarding diagnosis and management. I would like to thank AIOC, I would like to thank my mentors, and I would like to thank my fellows also, because without whom my PPT would have been complete. Thank you very much.